Hey folks, welcome back to part 2 of troubleshooting for no spark in your vintage Mopar, or it doesn't have to be an Mopar, any vintage old car with a breaker type with points ignition system. We're going to get into further testing and troubleshooting. We're going to use a multimeter. I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to take some measurements, explain to you what you can do with this tool. Alright, so here we go. Part 2 will take over where we left off exactly at the end of video 1. If you've not seen video 1, I'll put a link down below for you. Click watch video 1 first, come back and watch part 2. Here we go. Here you have another example of a distributor cap. Wires. The wire off my coil. On this style, it just threads onto that bolt there. See how clean that is? Nice new wire, heat shrink over top of it. I made that one myself, and it bolts on there. That's the signal to the points from my coil. Important. This is a bit of a bird's nest of wires, right? If these wires are the old cloth style, or even if they're the rubber style here, and they're old and they're crispy, they're not insulating the 12,000 volts very well. It goes in the center, around the cap, out to each wire. Now they're cross-firing, they're jumping, the wires are so close to each other, the electricity, 12,000 volts, may jump across one wire to the next. This is not hooked up. You're not going to have any spark. You are not going to have a spark. Check that, make sure it's not going to ground somewhere in the system when it's not supposed to. It needs to go to ground precisely when the points tell it to. One of the most important tools, the most valuable tools that I own, you should own. You want to work on your own cars, you gotta have a multimeter. You need one. They're not expensive. There's multiple different types and brands. Don't get the cheapest junk. Budget at least 50 bucks and get something half decent. This allows you to see in real time the magic of electricity theory, electron theory. You can measure and see voltage and amps, current, ohms, resistance. You need this to work on your car. You want to troubleshoot it. Now, I just call this the digital multimeter. There's old school ones. I've never used the analog ones from the 50s and 60s. I think they invented digital multimeters probably in about 1970, I don't know, late 70s, I don't know. Now there are different leads. This is called a lead wire. It plugs in to the multimeter. And on the end of the multimeter lead wires, you can have alligator clips. These are nice, so you can clip on, so you don't have to hold it with your hand. You just clip it on there. They usually don't come with those types of leads. They usually come with just standard pins like this. Then you need one in each hand, and you're trying to touch wires. When you're working on something that's out inside the engine bay and you're sitting in the cab, these don't work well. You need something longer. You can make your own leads. I do. Cut this apart and make it, insert and solder, heat shrink and crimp, maybe put together like another 10-foot chunk of wire in there. You get a nice long lead. I've got just testing wires, different lengths. This was an old pair of battery cables. You can see, just join them together. They'll confuse the heck out of somebody. Is it positive or is it negative? It doesn't matter. I don't care what color this is. This goes on one thing in the firewall, and I'm sitting in the cab. I can clamp to it. I can test continuity, voltage, different sizes, different lengths. Another one of my test wires. You need a multimeter. Please get one. If you're not measuring a wire to see if it's going to ground, if you can't tell if it's going to ground somewhere, if it's broken, the continuity isn't there, if it's extremely high resistance, then you're guessing. You're just throwing parts at it. You're spraying and praying. You're spraying it with parts and you're praying you're going to fix it. That is not a good mechanic. Spray and pray. You might get it right. You're lucky and you feel like a hero, right? I fixed my car. I just bought this and I fixed it. In some cases, yes, you might get lucky and you can do that. But when you're troubleshooting things you can't see electrons moving. It's called electron theory for a reason. We can't really see it, but we can measure it. We can do some checks. And we can nail it. This is good troubleshooting. If you want to be a good mechanic and fix your car, you got to understand how things work, so when they don't work, you can think about it and go, wait a minute, what, the circuit isn't a circle. Something's wrong. The circle's broken. You got to find out how. You need a multimeter. Get one. I'm going to show you a quick sample of how valuable this tool is, okay? There's a setting on here called continuity. And basically what it tells you is if a wire makes a loop, is it a circuit? Is it a circle? Let's just say that, listen, hear the beep? When these touch together, we have continuity. We have a circle. We have a circuit. Now, a circuit's going to be in between these two connections, right? We're going to try and check. Let's just see if something goes to ground. We know ground is connected to the battery. I'm going to use that post right there. Any metal structure that's connected to the frame, in theory, if I can get good continuity, which is, I should beep. This thing should beep, right? I'm connected to the ground. Listen. I'm touching the bolt that holds the thermostat housing in place. That's ground. This bracket here is ground. Oh, I just touched my spark plug. The part that's grounded into the cylinder head. And some of them, you mean, hear it? Ground. We know that's ground because it's going to ground. I'm actually literally feeding electricity. It's able to tell that sparks can go from the spark plug over here all the way back to here. That's ground. It's continuity. That's an awesome tool for checking. I want to check a wire. How about the wire that goes from my coil here and supposed to only go to ground when the points are closed? We can tell if the points are open right now or not by checking to see if it beeps to ground, because this is the wire. No continuity. I know my points are open right now. Want to put a bet on it? Let's open the distributor cap and see if the points are open, and we'll close them. This is going to beep, and if that works, then we know this wire it's sound. It's in good condition. This electricity cannot get from here to ground on its own unless the point's closed. Let's check it. Okay, so my points, they kind of look closed if you get close to them. They kind of look like they're closed, don't they? How come I don't hear a beep? Watch. They're just... I'm pushing them closed. There's no voltage here. I'm just checking continuity of the wire. The other end of my multimeter is connected to ground, right? One wire goes to ground, one wire goes to the coil. When the points are open, the electricity cannot flow from the coil to ground because the points are open. But as soon as I close the points, it flows and you get the beep. It's because these are just sitting in the exact spot where they appear to be closed. They're not. They're just starting to close. That tells me that wire is good. Here's where it's coming in distributor, right up here. Yeah. I did not build that wire. It came on my car. It's looks to be in decent shape. We know that wire is in good shape. So we know that my wire from the coil to the points works well. We tested it for continuity. It goes to ground when the points close like it's supposed to. We know that's working. It's a good wire. Now I've still got my wire to ground here off my coil, and we've got residual voltage in there. We were showing like 375 millivolts. That's just residual electricity in the coil. Right now, because I've got this wire going to my multimeter right to ground, if I turn the key on, I should get 6 volts here because it's allowed to go to ground through my multimeter. So that's another test to make sure we have voltage at the multimeter. I'm going to turn the key on, see if that hits 6 volts. Indeed it does, 6.3 volts. That's great, we got voltage at the coil. Okay, here's one fun little test we can do. I have my wire hooked up down there, where it connects to the points. That's my coil wire, hooking up right there with the coil. Sorry, the wire to the coil, right here. The other one I'm gonna put to ground here. And we get continuity. That means my points are closed right now. Sure they are. So if I turn the key on and start wiggling the points, I should see a spark there. Let's try that. Let's see if I can get myself a little bit of a shock here. Try not to touch the ground at the same time. I saw a spark. Did you see a spark? Got my screwdriver there? Ooh. Yep, we got spark. There's voltage at the points. Okay, maybe I'm beating this to death, but I just want to make sure you understand what I was doing there. I quickly just tested the wire from here, and my other wire was hooked up to ground over here on my digital multimeter. So if this goes up to the multimeter, we'll call that MM for multimeter, and the other wire comes down and hooks up right here, I've created a loop from here to ground. And I checked the wire. I also checked it right here where it went in the distributor. I moved this lead wire out of here. I put it over here. And I checked continuity. That means the electricity flowed through that wire perfectly. It's doing what it's supposed to. We know that it can hold electricity. And when I tested it to ground, when I moved the ground wire over to here to ground on the multimeter beeps when the connection is closed and we have a circle. You complete a circuit. It beeped. It did not beep until I closed the points right here. Joined them together, beep, took it apart, and went away. Tells me we got good continuity here and the points are doing what they're supposed to do. When you're troubleshooting, you want to see 6 volts at the battery, of course. You need to see it at your key switch. On one side of the key switch, you're going to measure, you're going to hook your multimeter up, one wire going to there from the multimeter and the other wire going to ground, and you're going to measure voltage at this side of the switch. It should be 6 volts over here with reference to ground. 6 volts on a 6 volt system. It's actually 6.6 volts, 3.2 volts per cell times 3 equals 6.6 volts. So a really good strong battery should around 6.6 or so volts. If you're not getting 6.6 volts out of that battery, your battery's weak. It's making 6 volts only, maybe 6.2 volts, whatever. Think about that voltage going to your coil, and it multiplies 1,000 times. If you're down on your voltage, you're going to be down on the amount of voltage it gets to your sparks too, or to your spark plugs. So you're going to have a weaker spark because your battery's not a good strong battery. Not only do you need a good strong battery to crank the engine over fast to build compression so you get good combustion in the engine, you also need high voltage so you can get, not high voltage, you need to have a good voltage at your battery, 6.6 or so volts, so that you can get 12,000 volts on the secondary side of the ignition system. You need good battery, clean connections. So we can test voltage here at this side of the switch, and then on the other side of the switch you might want to test it from here to ground, and it should be 0 volts. Then you turn your key on, all of a sudden you get 6 volts over here on this side. Perfect, it's going to your coil. You can measure it right here too, at this point to ground, through your multimeter. 6 volts right there. You can hook your multimeter up to ground, bypass the points, and get 6 volts here if you want to check that. Maybe I'll go check that. I'll go show you 6 volts on my starter switch. And I think I did my math here. Okay, I got my calculator because my math, I could do it, but you don't need to watch me do long division or long multiplication. I said 2,600 RPM, you're ripping down the highway. That's per spark plug, times 6 spark plugs. 2,600 times 6, 15,600 times per minute that the coil has to charge and discharge and the points opening and closing. 15,000, that's insane, in a minute. Okay, so 60 seconds divided by 15,600, 0.003861. That's like, I don't even know, that's like 3 thousandths of a second? What is that, nanoseconds? I'm not a scientist, milli, micro, nano, pico, whatever. That's how quickly the coil has to charge and collapse, charge, collapse. 0.0038 of a second is how quickly that has to happen. Unbelievable. So you don't have a lot of time there, so setting your dwell is key, important, because when you change your dwell, you change how much time the points are closed and how much time that gets to charge. And the more time you have that to charge, you get a higher voltage. On the secondary side, 12,000 volts, you get a stronger blue arcing spark that gives you a good combustion in your cylinder and gives you more horsepower, more torque, and you can climb a hill. Crazy, eh? I hope this stuff is valuable to you. I hope you can understand maybe what I'm trying to say here. Pretty redneck, pretty basic. It's not scientific really. It's more skin knuckles type information for a home garage guy. I hope you find that valuable. Get out there, get your multimeter, fix your car, find out why it doesn't have a spark. I'm hoping this is valuable. All right, we're gonna check voltage at the key switch with reference to ground. I got a ground under here that I like to use. It's just basically the park brake bolt. My ground wire's on there. Plug in at my key switch here. On one side, there you go, spark, see? It's hot. We have 6 volts there. Turn on my multimeter. 6.4 volts. Battery's down a little bit. I go for a good drive and charge it up, it'll get stronger. So that's on the hot side of the switch. I got 6 volts, perfect. Now the other side of the switch, the other wire, I get nothing until I turn let's turn the key on. 6 volts. Perfect. We have voltage at the key switch. We have voltage after the key switch. We have voltage at the coil. We got good spark at the points. One variable still in there is the coil. If you've done all your troubleshooting and you can't seem to figure out why you got no spark, maybe it's your coil. Well, coil's cheap. If you want to go stock coil is not going to be cheap. Pretty expensive actually, the old stock ones. But you can run a new modern 6-volt coil in there and run 2 wires. Instead of having a wire at the back of the coil, you put them both at the front side and hook them up. Pretty basic. If you don't have 6 volts here, you got to start going backwards from there. Find the wire. Where does it go? Why is there not 6 volts there? It's got to be. You need it. You know what else might be fun? What if we measured ohms in the coil? You set your multimeter to ohms, which is the amount of resistance. If I just touch these 2 wires together, no resistance. Okay, so no resistance across these 2 wires. Now we're going to measure resistance from the primary side of the coil. The wire goes into the back, comes out the front. What do we got? 1.4 ohms. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea what a half decent coil might look like. I took the bolt out just to give it maybe a little better continuity. 1.4 ohms. I wonder if we could measure the, there should be, if you put up your multimeter there and you get 0, like infinity, like I'm trying to measure ohms across this, right? It's gonna be 0 because there's no connection, right? No ohms, of course not. Can't make a circuit. So if you hook up your multimeter here to measure resistance on a coil and you get 0 ohms, it tells you there's a broken wire in the coil. It can't make the circuit. So your primary coil has failed. Does that make sense? So if you're troubleshooting your coil, you can use that for your reference if you want. 1.4 in the primary. Why don't we take a look at my cap here on my car? What do we see in there? The contacts are pretty good. Decent shape. I'm good with that. What's the rotor look like? A little bit of wear here. Time to clean that up. A little bit of oxidation there. Give that a little file, clean it up. You don't want any resistance. This corrosion causes resistance and slows down the electricity flow. So if we clean that up, it's going to flow better. We want it flowing fast. Electricity comes down the center and across here and out. So this is just a bridge, really. It's just a way for electricity to get from the center coil wire out to the spark plug inside a distributor cap. After you've had your cap off, make sure you put your rotor on, of course. Make sure all your plug wires are tight. Coil wires tight, all of them. This is an interesting little thing that Chrysler engineers came up with. Somebody did. Keep your wires sort of straight.
but they're bunched together. So if you get bad wires, you get cross voltages potentially. These are not stock wires. The old ones were cloth. So we know. So we've had cap off, points off, wires off, spark plugs out. I've had all kinds of stuff going on, showing you guys. Is it going to run again? You saw me clean the rotor with emery cloth. You know what? There's an improvement. It's running better. All I had to do was clean that rotor. I've been doing little bits to this car ever since I bought it, making it a little bit better. And I missed the rotor. Can you believe that? It's better.
All right, so that's a fairly lengthy little series on how to troubleshoot for no spark. I hope you saw some value in that. Really tried to strip it down for the new folks learning, the up-and-comers, the next generation of vintage car owners. Not a lot of points and condensers around anymore for people to study, so maybe this will help. You got to remember with electricity, it moves at the speed of light, and it wants a clear, free path to move. Your entire electrical system is only as good as the weakest part of it. If you've got a wire that's corroded and rusty, electrons are going to slow down. They're not going to be able to get through it. Start at the source. Start at the battery. Where does it go from the battery? It's your multimeter. Find it. It goes to the ammeter maybe. Then from the ammeter to the key switch. And then from the key switch, it comes out of the key switch and goes to the coil. Then from the coil to the points to the ground. Check every connection. You can do that with a multimeter. Every one of them, clean them up, tighten them up. Make sure there's no rust. Everywhere there's pitting from arcing, like inside the points, we know arcing there. Inside the distributor cap, between the cap and the rotor, there's arcing. At the spark plug, there's arcing. Clean it up. Keep it perfectly clean. Inside the engine's a dirty spot, so get on your spark plugs a little more than once every 2 years. Clean them up. You're going to get a better, hotter spark. Keep everything clean. Anyway, if you like what you see, please subscribe. Got any suggestions on stuff you want to see? I'll entertain that. If I don't know what I'm doing, I'll research it. Maybe I can make another video about something I don't know anything about. That's always fun. Anyways, have a good one. Thank you very much for checking out my channel. If you like what you see, hit like, please, and we'll catch you on the next one.